Hello and welcome to another week of Insight. So much has been said about the Earth's rising temperature and observable variations in the climate system. We know this to be climate change, and experts say it is largely caused by anthropogenic activities which largely alter the atmospheric composition of the Earth. Well, climate change and the impact of global warming is our focus on Insight today. Of course, I've got with me Cecil Egbele, who will be presenting the media reviews segment. Cecil?
Yes, and on the media reviews segment, we shall be having the newly elected NUJ FCT Council Chairman on set with us. We'll talk the elections and plans for better journalism practice in the FCT.
Well, it sure promises to be an interesting episode. Up next is the discussion segment. Thanks for staying with us. We're discussing climate change and the impact of global warming. World leaders and experts have converged on Poland for the 24th conference of the parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. COP24, as it is called, is expected to appraise COP21, that is the agreement reached in Paris in 2015, and of course prefer ways to further implement decisions reached at the conference in 2015 and the way forward. Well, I've got two gentlemen in the studio here with me to analyze global warming and the impact of climate change, especially as it concerns Nigeria. I have Usman Jemada in the studio with us here today. Welcome to the studio, sir.
Thank you. Good evening.
I also have with me here in the studio David Mike Teungwa. These gentlemen are both environment experts. Welcome to the studio, David.
Thank you for having me.
Gentlemen, I will begin from a somewhat, not trivial, but it's quite serious, because in spite of all we see happening around the world, we still have a situation where we have notable persons, leaders, actually still describing climate change and the impact of global warming as a ruse or a stunt. Why is that even possible? Usman, please.
Yes. Well, one of the reasons why you have notable figures, world leaders, and that are now doubting whether climate change exists is because of the scientific nature. You see, it requires a lot of scientific evidence, compelling, to convince them that such a phenomenon like climate change is happening. Even when recent incidences of flood, drought, and so on have been occurring, and even the fire disasters that have been happening in the US, you have key figures like the President of the United States, President Trump, describing it as a hoax, that they don't believe that such a thing like climate change exists. In fact, recently, a number of US environment agencies and scientific meteorological agencies came with a report that is so massive, you know, and that report points to the fact that unless the US government does something, that climate change is going to affect the economy of the United States, and it's going to affect even the natural ecosystem, which they're now witnessing a lot of floods and fire incidences and disaster, for example. So there's a need to come up with more practical ways to convince them. But beyond that, some of it is self-interest. The United States, for example, is the greatest emitter of carbon. Carbon emission, China, United States are the two culprits that are in the forefront of carbon emission, greenhouse global warming. For example, you have the coal industry, which were a very key lobby group that contributed during the President Trump election. They are a very powerful lobby, and they did not want a situation whereby their industry would be closed in the future. Because, as you know, the climate change agreement is to achieve zero emission by 2050. All right, that is the target, to achieve zero emission by 2050. But by that period, a lot of the industries that are engaged in fossil fuel, hydrocarbon, like petroleum industries and so on, are expected to change to some other thing, you know, renewable energy, to now focus direction on renewable energy. And so it is in the United States self-interest. As you know, Trump is championing what it calls nationalism, in the American national interest. It is not to Trump's national interest to champion a course of zero emission, because they are thinking that it's going to put out a lot of workers out of job if they do so. So it's not that they do not actually believe, but they're looking at their own national interest. Even in Europe, you still have skeptics that are saying that climate change cannot work for now, because you have Germany that is an auto industry that is afraid that some of its workers may be laid off, and then its auto industry will be affected. So you have to do a lot of convincing to say that renewable energy works. All right, renewable energy works, and you can actually achieve a lot with renewable energy, much as you are doing with fossil fuel, because renewable energy is clean energy, and I don't see why they should not be in the forefront. It's just in their own immediate interest. That is why they are not ready to support climate change mitigation.
David, in your opinion, what is more incredible? I mean, come to think of it, is it that, what is more incredible? Is it that climate change does not exist, or the fact that there are people who think it is a ruse or a stunt?
Actually, I would say that even the President Trump himself knows that climate change exists and is happening. But like he rightly said, it is the business angle that they're all looking at. Truth is, they know that they are vulnerable, but for us in Africa and other parts of the world, we are more vulnerable, and if we are to implement the Paris Agreement based on what it is, it means that they will have to sacrifice a lot to take care of us, in quotes, because Africa contributes less than 4% to greenhouse gas emissions, but we are very vulnerable. So if we are talking of mitigation, we should embrace renewable energy, afforestation, etc. They are expected to pay their dues. And because they don't want to, they bring up stories like climate change does not exist or it is not real. They know that it is real. But the business as usual thinking is what is keeping them in the situation of doubting and trying to drive the world around. But the truth is, out of the close to 200 countries that have ratified the Paris Agreement, you just have the US. Then it was US and Syria. Syria, you understand, because of the war situation. But right now, you just have one country. So you should know that it's just games at this point.
Let's look at the impact of climate change here in Nigeria. You see desertification in the north, some parts of the north. You see flooding from coast to coast in some parts of the south. How bad was it, say, 10 years ago? And, I mean, how is it worsening?
It is worsening day by day, and the economic cost is what we cannot quantify. Right now, you know how much NEMA spent on relief materials on the recent flooding that took place in the country. Now, you look at food security as number one issue. Before now, a farmer from Benue, where I come from, who depends largely on rain-fed agriculture, not irrigation, can easily predict when the rains will come and when he will plant and all that. But all that has changed with the change in rainfall patterns as a result of climate change. And this affects food security, and it's a major issue in the country. Security issues, as we currently have, even with the Boko Haram, with the farmers' herdsmen crashes within the central part of the country, it is all related to climate change, because the herdsmen will keep on shifting away up north because of the desertification, and then they want to settle in the center. So there's competition over land and water. Talk about health. We know how much the country spent on malaria, for example. The weather is getting hotter, the temperature is increasing, and mosquitoes will thrive and better when it's warmer. Not just mosquitoes, other disease like meningitis. We're in December, soon we'll be in February, March, and then you have this over and over again. So the impacts are already here. If you take out time to meet an elderly person, will tell you that even now, the Hamatans before now would have been more severe than we are. A friend in Lagos told me how hot it was in Lagos. So all the evidence are here, and it's not for us to sit down and wait or judge if Trump is believing that climate change is real or not. It's for us to take action. And in all sincerity, I must commend the president that for the past 3 COPs, starting from the Paris Agreement, he has been there, he goes, and even now he's in Poland. But I would say that it is much more than attending the conferences. Action is needed at home. Our people must adapt to the effects of climate change. Yeah.
Usman, we have a political leadership that has shown commitment. David just alluded to that. Do we have, or how much so as a national institutional framework, helped us in mitigating the impact, adverse impact of climate change here in Nigeria?
Well, I think the first is to show the institutional leadership, which the president has demonstrated by attending all the meetings. Now, we also need at the various levels to follow up. At the state levels and at the local government levels, you know, it's not just enough at the national level to show that leadership and commitment to climate change mitigation. We need also to get states to buy into the whole business of climate change mitigation. It is only when we have them committed to it, because right now we know we have energy problem. We have problems of energy. And one of the ways in which we can tackle this energy problem is to go into renewable energy, which is a cheap source of energy, whether biogas, whether windmill, whether solar, even solar panels, you know. These are areas that can complement the current use of fossil fuel, which is, but which very soon will be phased out, you know. Then we also need to begin to think about replacement to our oil, which is our mainstay now. Okay, I just said countries look at their own interest, and on the basis of their interest, we can continue to support climate change mitigation and to take all the necessary action without compromising our own foreclosing our own development agenda. You know, it can go on. We can pursue our development agenda at the same time also go on to support climate change mitigation. You know, what we need is sustainable development. Sustainable development is that you do not compromise, you know, your ability to pursue development course with, and at the same time stem deforestation, desertification, you know, all these all these ills that are affecting us right now. We can take actions against them if we reduce carbon emission. If we reduce carbon emission, and if we also cut back on fossil fuel use, we can achieve a lot in terms of climate change mitigation and the harms and the consequences that are happening. But the demonstrated leadership has already been shown by the president, and all we need is the state governors, the local government chairmen, and so on to also key in, to also buy in, and to pursue this agenda of climate change mitigation.
Usman, I'm going to need you to clarify some more on this issue, especially in terms of responsibilities, where the buck stops and where, you know, it begins for the next actor in this whole process. Say, for instance, would you let us understand what you think should be the responsibility of the federal government on the one hand, the state actors like the state government, and then the civil society, and then of course the private sector as well.
Yes.
Please just help me take it, you know, one at a time. Like, perhaps you should begin with the federal government. You've already spoken to it a bit. Yes.
Yes, and the federal government can come with clear policies that are out to mitigate climate change. All right, they can set out all the necessary parameters, laws that control pollution, laws that control, for example, you know, stiffer penalties on some of the actions, human action, because a lot of it is human action. And then we need to guide people on how they can behave in terms of the environment, towards the environment, cutting of woods, chopping down, and you know, all these are clear policies that must be laid out, and that is the responsibility of the federal government.
And the states?
And the states also can set up edicts too, at their own level too. The issue of cutting down of trees too, you know, cutting down of trees at state levels, and then trying to provide alternatives, you know. These are some of the things that can be done at state level. State levels can achieve, you know, can tie in taking a cue from the federal government, you know, and then they can also do much in terms of laying the parameters for industries and other economic sector activities to follow, you know, rules and guidelines for them to such that they do not, you know, contribute to the climate change, to the evils of climate change.
In the private sector?
A private sector can assist. Well, they are mainly industries that do not engage in flaring up, contributing towards renewable energy, global renewable energy. Renewable energy in maybe, for example, biogas, solar energy, they can now begin to manufacture these things and also find a cheaper way, of, and if even things like cooking stove, these things can be done by private sector. Private sector can contribute a lot in that direction. So I think there's a role for everybody. The NGOs, civil societies can enlighten more, all right? For example, we have journalists who are also engaged in environmental action awareness. Some of them can also be co-opted in further enlightening people and educating on the issue of climate change mitigation. So there's a role for everybody. I mean, I think it is not just only government actors or private sector or so, but each and everybody has a role to play,
Okay. David, how successfully have we been able to merge these roles that Usman has just outlined? Do we perhaps have a policy that we've deployed over time to harness and, holistically put these roles together in evolving a strategy that works for us?
I would say no. First, we need to have a climate change bill, which is still lying at the National Assembly. The Nigerian government, in our Paris Agreement that we signed, in our NDCs, we have 5 sectorial areas. We have oil and gas, we have renewable energy, we have transport, we have industry, and we have agriculture. Now, all the 5 I mentioned are different ministries. They are not Ministry of Environment. But it seems that everything is left to the Ministry of Environment. For example, why the government is saying that by 2030, we should have invested at least 30% of our energy should be from renewable energy. The Ministry of Power, on the other hand, is saying that they want to invest in coal. So you see the contradiction. So same for the Ministry of Agriculture, for example. Sometimes we look at GMOs as a climate smart agricultural practice, which is not. So there is need to harmonize, and we can do this through the climate change bill. But this is still at the federal level. Where the people are, it is at the state level and the local government level. And there it appears nothing is happening. We have laws. There is no state that does not have laws against felling of trees, for example, indiscriminate waste disposal, etc. But the issue is the enforcement of those laws, which need to be strengthened. And the other people that were left out in your question is the individual, ourselves. What can
I was
we
actually
do?
going to come to that. That was what I was going to ask you next on, because we do know that human activities, our anthropogenic activities, are largely responsible for the issue of climate change and rising earth temperature.
Yes.
If you take a good look at one of such practices that we even do, even at state and federal level, it's reclamation. Okay, we are close to the Pacific, we're close to somewhere around Lagos, we're close to the Atlantic. And then we see areas like the Lekki axis where a lot of reclamation is taking place. Should we be concerned over such real estate development in axis like that? What danger does it portend for us?
Thank you. That is why the business people also need to be part of the solution. it is not all about money. It is not all about profit. The truth is, the sea level is rising, right? The major flooding we've had in this country of recent, you know what has happened in Lagos and what keeps happening in Lagos. So, if you are reclaiming, you know what nature does. It will get back, nature will reclaim back what belongs to it. So, the business people should also realize that it is about the future. It is about humanity. It is not just about quick profit. And talking about business, climate change provides the best opportunity for everybody. It provides an opportunity for us as a country, as a developing country, to develop more sustainably. Not developing like the Chinese, where right now, soon you discover there is smoke everywhere. You see everybody walking around the streets with nose mask because of air pollution. Okay, so if we are going the way of coal and other forms of energy that contribute to these issues, is the same experience we will have. So we should be learning from those people. But the business people can invest in renewable energy. If you go around Abuja, for example, you see the number of houses that are having solar panels. It's increasing. Now, panels will not go alone. There is batteries. We don't have any company in Nigeria that produces batteries. It is a huge investment opportunity for our business people to go into. Another is, which is one of the most significant environmental destructive acts, is the fuel wood that we use. Now, we are destroying our forests. Right now in the country, I would say we have just a little left in Cross River State of, I would say, the tropical rainforest. Everything is destroyed. Now, this is what will help to mitigate climate change. The forest absorbs all the greenhouse gases, right? So, now we are flaring gas. That same gas can become the same liquefied natural gas that we use in our houses for cooking. So why do we flee when we can as well help our people? So the business people have a lot to do. It's not just about government. And then individuals like me and you. So this place is very close to FCDA office. So instead of driving to this place, you just take a walk. What have you done? If you drive, you are emitting. If you take a walk, you are not emitting anything. It's even good for your health, right? So you have 20 families going to Kaduna, for example, and everybody is driving. That is how many cars? 20 cars emitting. And that's why we're happy with some successes in the transportation sector, like the train. You see the number of people that use the train to go to Kaduna. So that reduces the number of vehicles that should be emitting, you know, on the way and all that. So for us as individuals, we have a critical role to play. Save water in your house when you're not using it. Turn it off. What happens? If you are wasting water, you must use energy. It is energy that is used in pumping that water, right? Same with electricity. You are not using it, you turn it off. Thank God for the prepaid meters. Now everybody is learning how to conserve, unlike before when, you know, people waste. So there are a lot of things. Another is food waste. The environmental impact of food waste is very huge, even economically. But sometimes we don't look at the economic aspect. But the environmental impact of food waste. In fact, one of the greenhouse gases that is more potent than CO2 is methane. And that comes out from food, rotten food. If you pass around the dump site, you hear that very strong smell. That is a gas. It's a potent gas, methane. You go to our parties, they serve people food, they just take one spoon, and the rest is wasted. If you think how much it costs, the water that was used to produce, the transportation and all that processing and packaging and storage to get that food to the table, and even the preparation to get it to the table where it is, and then you just waste. That is a lot wasted. So as individuals, there's a lot we can do.
Both of you actually made allusion to the rising sea levels. Let me read you an excerpt from Wikipedia that speaks to the issue of rising sea level, and then we can take the discourse from there. I quote, "At least since 1880, the average global sea level has been rising with about 18 centimeter rise from 1897 to 1997. More precise satellite-based data show about 7.5 centimeter accelerating rise in sea levels from 1993 to 2017. Gentlemen, 1993, 2017, I mean, surpasses what we've seen, how we saw the sea rise over the course of more than 20, 30 years. We have a problem on our hands. We did talk about the rising Nigeria being close to the Atlantic and the danger it portends, especially for coastal areas in the country. We've seen flooding across different parts of the country. Incessant. It happens time to time.
Every year.
Every year.
No.
I mean, we prepare for them. Most times we prepare, and yet it happens like it's almost taking us unaware. What is the way forward for us?
Well, the way forward is, if you know the course of what is responsible, I think you can actually take action towards mitigating. The course we know is that globally, the Arctic regions, Antarctica, are melting. Glaciations, boulders are, increasing. The oceans are flowing into the seas, seas are flowing into rivers, and all this is creating flood around the world, and this is something that is attributed to global warming. So, number one is to mitigate carbon emission, all right, to reduce the warming. The target by COP24 is 1.5 degrees Celsius. Yes, that is the target. But there are fears that it may rise to 3 degrees even, or more, and that may spell disaster. So we have to take steps humanly possible to stem this rise in temperature. And the only way we can do that is policies that ensure that key players do not contribute to carbon emission. We must reduce our fossil fuel. We must also do everything possible to also guide people who live around coastal areas not to engage in activities that lead to the degradation of land. Land degradation also contributes in many ways. So if we can do that, I'm sure that we can get a lot of our citizens to understand and to educate, to change their attitude towards the way they react to the environment, especially, things like dumping in drainages, and these are human activities that all contribute towards flooding and so on. So, these are, in many ways, individuals can do a lot to stem the tide of the effects of climate change. Then the issue of desertification. Desertification, he mentioned herders, farmers clashes. The movement, south in search of pasture. We must do everything to stem that kind of movement. And that is taking action. Already Lake Chad, which is the Lake Chad basin, is shrinking. The president was there recently to galvanize action by the countries that border around Lake Chad, the countries that are key stakeholders. we must do something to ensure that, you know, the lake comes back. We must do all we can. And already there are suggestions that there should be inter-basin transfer from the river Bangui and so on. So these are, you know, ways by which we can mitigate the effects of climate change. And
David, you threw up the issue of technology and developing climate-friendly solutions to climate change. Of course, we are very vulnerable to climate change in Nigeria, and we are, of course, signatory to the Paris 2015 agreement. I also do know that in some climes, in some parts of the West, they have some low-carbon transport initiatives where you have vehicles emitting almost zero or low carbon into the atmosphere. We have a program in Nigeria where we have the authority issue vehicle-worthy certificates to vehicles to ply our roads. These certificates are issued to vehicle owners to ply our roads. If stepped up, can this initiative perhaps be transformed into a somewhat low-carbon transport initiative that would work for us? Because you made allusions to technology earlier on when you talked about solar. What I think, or I deduce, might be the problem is adaptation, implementation. Is that what we have as a challenge here? Can we perhaps translate what I've just outlined into something that works for us here in Nigeria?
Yes. For us in Nigeria and many parts of Africa, we should be preaching more of adaptation. And that is why what the West don't want to hear. They want to hear mitigation. So we should be mitigating what they are emitting. But we are already being affected. So we have to adapt to the changing climate. All right? And adapting means better planning. We need to start planning. Some of the floods that we have in this country, many are not as a result of climate change. They are as a result of poor planning, poor urban planning. People go to build in floodplains. They know that these are floodplains, but they will still go buy land and build. But we have departments of urban planning in almost every state of the Federation, and these buildings are allowed to go on. And when the water comes, they take it out. So, the challenge we have regarding emission from cars is that most of the cars we use in this country are fairly used cars, second-hand cars that we import without checking their emission levels. In most countries, when a policeman stops you, the first thing he asks for is your environmental compliance certificate and not your particulars in quote, as it is done here. So, many other countries across the world, India, for example, is saying that by 2030, all their cars will be converted to electric cars to reduce the level of pollution in New Delhi, for example, that is one of the most polluted cities in the world. So what happens? India, for example, is one of our customers. They buy our crude. So if all their cars are converted to electric, what happens? We have lost a customer. It's the same with Germany, it's the same with France. But I bet you what will happen is, as they are changing to electric cars, they are shipping those cars down to us. Well, what can we do with the ones we already have? There is need to check the emission of every car. If you check around the world, you know of the CEO of Volkswagen and many other companies that have been sacked, have resigned.
A whole line of cars were recalled.
Millions of cars will be recalled because of emission. For us, they are here. One little thing we can do is to introduce one very simple device. It's called the catalytic converter.
Catalytic converter.
Yes, which will reduce
emission.
We can do that. for a start.
Okay.
But then we now ensure that any car coming into the country must have a level of emission that is allowable.
COP24 is supposed to facilitate dialogue on national commitment, you know, of course, with regards to agreement reached in Paris in 2015. We already have countries like Brazil withdrawing its offer to host next year's World Climate Change Forum. Does this portend a challenge to the Paris Agreement?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's going to be a temporary setback, but other countries will pick up where Brazil stopped. But there is the need to get the commitments of every country. Every country needs to buy into COP24. That is the most important aspect of it.
Thank you, David. Quickly.
One of the major achievements for COP24 will be the adoption of the rule book. And any country that decides not to be part of this will also suffer. I believe that going forward, we should be doing business with countries that have adopted the Paris Agreement.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, David. It's also been a pleasure speaking with you. We've had as our guest today on the program, these are both gentlemen are environmental experts who have been speaking on the impact of climate change and global warming, of course, as it affects us globally and also here in Nigeria. Well, that's it for the discussion segment. We'll now move on to Ceci with the media review segment.
Thank you for remaining with us. This is the media review segment of Insights. And on this segment, we shall be taking a look at the recently concluded NUJ FCT Council election. Actually, we are featuring the chairman, the guy who emerged winner after a keenly contested election. Please help me in welcoming on the media review segment, Emmanuel Ogbeche. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me here.
Mr. Chairman, you are the last two-time secretary.
Yes.
And you've contested a couple of times for the chairmanship seat.
Well, I contested for chairman 3 years ago.
3 years ago, okay,
Yes.
and this year you got it. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
And after your win, you promised that you're going to bring professionalism into the practice, or you're going to promote professionalism in the practice. Now, let's start with the election that brought you in. How would you say it was conducted? Because I know the journalists, with the coming of elections around the corner in 2019, there have been different feature stories encouraging the public and politicians on free, fair, and credible elections. Would you say the elections that brought you in was free, fair, credible? Didn't we experience some currency changing hands?
Well, thank you very much. None of that happened because we are no money bags, and we do not have money bags in the NUJ. We had well over 600 journalists coming to cast their vote, and you wonder where we'll bring the kind of money we find in politics out there. So this wasn't about money. This was about trust. This was about commitment. This was about belief and passion. Good and fine. It wasn't about money.
All right, good and fine. It wasn't about money. Now, elections 2019 is just around the corner, and truth be told, some media houses have some kind of political bias, maybe the owners of some vested interest in some parties. How do you plan to ensure that journalists reporting politics and elections during this period are free, fair, and credible, knowing that their employers, they may have to bend a little just to please he who pays the piper?
Yes, I clearly understand your concern. The issue of media ownership and the structure has always been a problem in terms of deciding editorial content. But I'm very much persuaded that given what it has taken and series of workshops that have been held for journalists here in FCT and in Nigeria, our colleagues are very much aware that you have to work for the good of Nigeria. We are not members of political parties per se. And even if you were, Your professional demand requires that you're objective, you're balanced in your reportage. And media owners essentially are not in charge of editorial policy. Journalists, by and large, are in charge. So it depends very much on the editor. It depends very much on who heads the news section. And we will work very closely with our colleagues to encourage them to, as much as possible, remain neutral, be objective, put Nigeria first. That is the core of the matter. We cannot be seen to be taking sides. We do not belong to Party A or Party B. And to that extent, you must give each and every candidate a fair opportunity, a platform where they can articulate and air their policies, their views, and their programs, so that the electorate, at the end of the day, will make the critical decision as to who is elected in 2019.
I like the part where you said earlier that you're not money bags there. Now, but these, your journalists, they will be covering elections where the money bags are.
Yes.
So, are you worried that these bags, these currencies will just dangle in the faces of a journalist and we may see some kind of unprofessional practice?
Yes, in every rule there is an exception, and in every circumstances you find people that may bend, you understand. But by and large, I sincerely believe that a majority of those that will be out in the field covering this election will be upright, will be objective, and will abide by the professional ethics, which requires that news is not for sale.
News is not for sale. Now, quackery in the practice has always been there for a long time. Very briefly, any plans your office is planning to do to help curb this?
Yes, that's very instructive. Few years ago when I was secretary, we had a committee that had to deal with the issue of quackery and fakes. And I will agree that we have a lot of quacks in this city, in Abuja. What we intend to do is to liaise closely with security agencies, in particular the police and the civil defense. Because from past experiences, you just need to have a committee that is dedicated. And this time around, I am going to head that committee. We will carry out periodic raids at events and ceremonies where you find a whole lot of quacks. And we'll also encourage people to always be with their office IDs. And where we think a journalist or a supposed journalist credibility is in doubt, we'll call your office. Because we have the contacts of most offices, we'll enlarge the database we have presently. And it may trust you to know that the NUJ has ongoing registration process. You understand? It's building a database for all journalists in Nigeria, including the FCT. So we encourage our members to take advantage of this opportunity and get registered. It's a rigorous process. And we will come after quacks. It is a promise we've made, and we intend to live by that promise.
Okay, there's been this constant cry of the Minister of Culture and Honorable Minister of Culture and Tourism, Lai Mohammed, fake news. He has always cried that fake news should be avoided. We should try to fight fake news in all its ramifications and the way it comes. Fake news and hate speech may just be a serious issue as the elections come around the corner. How is the NUJ planning to key into this whole fight?
Yes, fake news is not just a Nigerian phenomenon, including hate speech. But by and large, fake news, hate speech is domiciled in social media. No news organization worth its salt will indulge or peddle fake news and hate speech. But I know before I came into office, there have been few training programs, few workshops, particularly on fake news. We intend to broaden the scope. We intend to get experts to talk to our members at different forums. And we are optimistic that fake news will not find its place in traditional media, and also dissuade our members, even those you find on social media, from spreading fake news.
Social media is an issue that I would have really wanted us to talk about, but I'll keep that for now, hoping that we'll bring you here to talk about it again. Lastly, the welfare of the Nigerian journalists, let's say the FCT. Any plans to join in the fight for the better welfare of the journalists? Maybe with that, the whole brown envelope syndrome will gradually become a thing of the past?
Yes, we have plans. We intend to engage with our stakeholders, whether owners of media, industry, Federal Capital Territory Administration, and employers of labor generally. But as a union, welfare is very instructive or instrumental in what we intend to do. We intend to meet our members halfway. We want to encourage our members to go back to school, and if we have to give up to 30–40%, we will do that. And generally, we will work for our members. That is why we were elected. And we hope that we'll get the kind of support we need, and our members will cooperate with us in this regard and have the kind of NUJ we want. And in the next 3 years, we will sing Hosanna. All
right, we'll sing Hosanna. Now, just before I let you go, who can be a member of the NUJ? Yes,
first of all, it's prescribed. The minimum requirement is that you should have a diploma in any media-related course, journalism, media arts. Then you should be gainfully employed by media organization. We also have associate members, those that are not into core practice, but probably must have read mass communication, journalism, and media arts, such related courses.
Okay. Emmanuel Ogbeche, NUJ FCT Council Chairman, thank you very much for educating us on the profession of journalism, and we hope that your tenure is successful. And like you hope and intend, professionalism of the profession is taken to greater height. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the best wishes as well.
This has been the Media Review segment. In a short while, I will back on with Nnamdi for the concluding part of Insight.
Well, that's it for this episode of the program. It's been quite an enlightening one for me, and I hope it has been for you too. Cecil?
It's been enlightening for me too, and quite informative. I've learned quite a lot. Thank you.
Do keep a date with us, same time next week, for more on Insight.